Hey there, everyone. What's going on? This is David from Extreme Vocal Institute, and we're here to bring you our first EVI talks here in lockdown. And where we are today is speaking with Courtney from Spiritbox. How you doing over there?
Hi everybody. We're doing great. I live on an island in Canada, which I know doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, but it exists. So that's where I currently am holding up.
There we go. And how have things been for you over there? How have you been holding up in these past few months?
Well, where I live, we're very lucky. The province I live in, and then the island that I live on. I think right now we currently have one active case of COVID with someone in hospital, and that's it. So on our whole, we probably have 800,000 people on our island here. So we are very pleased with that.
And that's very fortunate. I'm glad to hear that you
Hmm.
guys have been able to handle that situation accordingly and that you've been able to stay safe and be able to essentially exist and function during this really intense time that we're all in.
Yeah. And
Now,
we're inverted people anyway. We're introverts, and this this is really no different for us than what we normally would be doing. Is just forgoing all social interaction and just doing music. So that's what we're doing.
oh yeah, and that's the best thing we can all be doing right now, especially in this
Yeah.
kind of situation, is making sure we're doing what we can to take the tools we have and then like the thing that we all still have, which is like our inspirations and like our thoughts and ourselves, and be able to make the best of it and actually do things work-wise musically and either write down how we're feeling and turn that into different forms of art and just kind of put in that work in the background.
Yeah, I threw away my world's tiniest violin for myself, like after about 24 hours of having like a tour canceled and stuff, because it's you realize how universal this all is and how small your whatever suffering you're going through is, and it makes things a lot easier to like let go of and just accept what's going on, because it's literally every person you know is affected by it.
Exactly. So the best thing we can do is try and think of it from all those different levels of perspective and act accordingly, just like you're
Hmm.
saying. Now, to bring things into the vocal category, where I want to start with is just some of the standard questions that we ask here. So, to start, what I wanted to ask is how long you have been screaming and singing, and if that started at the same time for you, or if you started one before the other.
Well, I was always a singer. I don't remember a time in my life where I didn't sing. And then as in grade school, I'd always be a part of the choir and stuff, but I was never the kid that got like the solos and stuff. I was a good singer, but I wasn't like the star singer. And then as I got older, I got very into musical theater, and just really it started to really connect with me because of the physical movement while you're singing, just like your body and your breath as you're trying to also sing and dance. And then I didn't start my own band until I was 18. And then within that band, it just very um, naturally progressed from a rock band to a metal band over the course of 6 years. I
Hmm.
just so for me, I didn't really listen to a lot of music that had screaming in it, and I wasn't exposed to a lot of music like that until I was 18.
And after the
uh,
band had already been going.
yeah, and then I started basically as my little brother, who was the songwriter in the band, as he
Mhm.
started to open up his musical tastes and discover new genres and vocal styles, then I was exposed to it, and it just felt, in my mind, I always just do what is most appropriate over the whatever musical part has been presented to me, and it really clicked to me that I could express how I wanted to express myself over those musical parts via screaming. So I'd say 2007, 2008 is when I started dipping my toe in, but I don't feel like I really came into my own until probably like 2012. I'd say is when I kind of started to click for me of like finding what my voice is.
Oh yeah, definitely, because it's a process for everybody and it doesn't always start at once. Like for it, and it's not always based on lots of different external kinds of sources. Sometimes it really does come from within because like you said, this is all of what we're doing here is just heightened forms of communication, and we're doing it because we have something that we want and we need to say.
Yeah.
So it's just finding whatever the right way to convey that message is, just like you're saying. And that's a very important way of looking at that. That being said, were there any external sources that kind of introduced you to that kind of art form that is screaming? That kind of made you think, oh, this is how I want to convey that. Like this translates to how I'm feeling.
It was really just in just bits of alternative rock where it's like I didn't even know what it was, um, but I knew that it's the dissonant sound that I was hearing really complemented whatever part, and I wasn't like uh, scared of it. Like just anything from hearing, just stuff that we would consider just like alternative radio, generic rock radio stuff,
Yeah.
like Chevelle, the band Chevelle. It's all singing, and then every once in a while there'll be like an aggressive yell, and I didn't quite know what it was, um, but I liked it. I would say my first actual introduction into seeing screaming and being like, what is this, is really late at night on MTV2. Linkin Park's One Step Closer came on,
Yeah.
and I don't and I didn't like it. Like I was like this is when I guess I was 12, and I
Yeah.
just thought it and I just thought it was like, I was like, these guys think they're punk, and I turned it off, and I didn't, and then as I got older I realized that I was being so judgmental because it was more about like the perception of the people doing that versus the actual music. And I was a 12-year-old girl obsessed with fitting in and wanting
Yeah.
everyone to like me. So as I got older, and Linkin Park got more popular, I think Chester Bennington is the first person that I saw that you could transition really fluidly in between the two types of singing, and it didn't feel like two different people.
Yeah. Because
you
it's just
know
conveying a different emotion at a different
yeah
time because no person is just one thing.
yeah
So that's
so
a
I
big
that's
one.
good for me. That's probably the one that I just was like, okay, there's a whole other subculture that I'm unaware of, and that we're not exposed to, and it's not being shoved down our throat. But it was many years until I actually started to immerse myself in that subculture.
And that viewpoint's very interesting because it brings up a really important point of the musicality to it, in that you describe that as dissonance, which is exactly what that is, because you're not just hearing one sound at any given time. You're actually hearing people be able to create multiple sounds at once to really change the perception of what they're saying to evoke specific kinds of emotions. So that shows some of that level of control. And that being said, I did want to touch upon that video you guys released recently of that live vocal playthrough of one of your songs. And
Yeah.
I had a number of students forward that to me, being like, "Have you seen this?" And I turned it on. And I was just like, "Yes!" The performance level and the control. And it's even when you're standing still to record something, the bits of movement that you can incorporate into that is a huge important part of the ability to actually honestly execute these kinds of things in a way where you're still even conveying the message in
hmm
that, in a somewhat more sterile environment, which for
Yeah.
many can be difficult. The big thing I really noticed in that video was the range work, especially seeing it done in the one sitting.
hmm
When you started to dabble with the screaming stuff after those few years of being in that first band and getting it going and having discovered that interest, did you feel like you had the range from the get-go, or did it take a long time to kind of figure out how to do these vocal backflips to and fro a little bit?
It took a long time. It took 5 years probably before, like, now when if I go to record, I'm pretty confident about what will come out of my mouth. Like I'm fairly confident what tone I'm going to hear and what the integrity of my voice that I'm going to hear. But from like 2008 to 2012, every time I opened my mouth, I truly had no idea what was going to come out. It was kind of like going
Yeah.
through puberty.
It's like,
But
what's inside a Wonder Ball? Hope I get
yeah,
something my way.
yeah. And it's one of those things that, in this day and age, if I was growing up, this day and age, 10 years later, I probably would have had a more, um, I probably would have been more thoughtful about what I was doing, because now we all have access to recording ourselves at home and actually hearing ourselves and
Yeah.
having to hold ourselves more accountable, um, of like how we sound and how we speak. Um, but it definitely was quite the journey, and I guess I just never tried to sound like anybody. Probably because there wasn't a lot of voices that felt like they were speaking to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you know, I really think it's cool that there's a lot of people that can like mimic other people's vocal styles. It's
Yeah.
the same thing as people um, that are um, voice actors or accent specialists. Like
Yeah.
I feel like that is like the ultimate vocal control.
Yeah.
And I don't really have that. For me, it's just like it is for the screaming, it's 0 to 100, and I I don't have I have not really had the desire to try to mimic other people's styles, but
Mm-hmm.
probably because I feel like I can't. So I'm like, well, I don't want to anyway.
Yeah. So there.
Yeah, so
But you
there.
you bring up a good point though, like that kind of acrobatic work and the other kinds of careers that exist in terms of just vocal sounds, it is all the same thing. And even when you're someone that's not manipulating tone to necessarily emulate that of other people, having that level of knowledge of just yourself does take that same kind of understanding. So to your own credit, you are able to very much navigate those things that you have to, like you said, know what's going to come out when you do a certain thing. And it takes many people varying amounts of time to figure that out. From
Mm,
and the thing is, I think that's pretty present in your writing, that ability to know what you're going for and do something that takes many people a long time, which is to know how to write for your own voice, which
yeah,
means taking the time to actually know what your voice is and what you're capable of. What was
yeah.
that like for you? Like what did it feel like trying to learn through doing it how to actually write for yourself versus kind of doing the thing where you write your ideas and you're like, "Oh, I have to actually do this. Oh god." What was that like?
Well, I think that back in the day when we didn't all have our home studios and stuff, that was really easy because truly the only way you could write anything, especially as a vocalist doing loud screaming, can't exactly hang out in your room on your guitar wailing like that.
Yeah.
So that you had to work things out in a practice.
You had to be with people.
Yes, and that was the only thing that made you feel like you were in a band. So you know you would spend 3 times a week practicing songs that you had been
Yeah.
playing for 3 years that you probably should not be practicing
Practicing
anymore.
anymore.
Like
Yeah.
you should just be practicing on your own. But that's when
It's what
we
you
all
do.
yeah, when you're a kid, like what else am I gonna do? Go into my little studio and do it? I don't have that. Um, but yeah, I think that with songwriting, I don't know what it is. I just feel like a lot of people that are into metal that then want to incorporate singing into their writing, you can just tell that they're a lot more comfortable screaming than they are singing. And it's almost kind of like the reverse of how it was with me, because I didn't quite know what my screaming voice was. And there's a lot of people at very high levels or lower levels that I can just tell that they haven't quite found out what their singing voice is. They're just emulating either what they think is going to be accessible and popular, or just emulating the people they look up to. um and that's not always going to work you know
Exactly, because you can never like truly just base yourself on another human being and expect that to really go somewhere, or expect
Yeah.
that to even like make you fundamentally happy with yourself,
Yeah.
essentially, which is a big one. How on the other side of that coin, even though like you and many other people, when they get started, and it takes many years to go past this point, to start to actually know what your own voice is and be comfortable within yourself to know what that is. With the product that you've put out, there's been a very intense consistency with like the depth of your tone that I've noticed. And
Oh,
what
cool.
that says to me is a different type of work ethic. And that's something a lot of people struggle with, is trying to keep themselves accountable for these kinds of things like you've mentioned. What
Hmm.
is your regular work ethic in terms of vocals like, and how has that maybe kind of been affected by the lockdown we've all been in and everything with the pandemic? And do you feel like that's been altered slightly?
Well, I think that for screaming and singing, it's like but it's more extreme in the screaming realm. Like it's like a muscle that you have to exercise.
Yeah.
It's like you're in an extreme sport and you have to exercise your muscles to continue to be able to do essentially like backflips off a giant cliff with like fire burning around you. It's like
Yeah.
and and
Crazy
it's
specific acrobat.
yeah, and it's very like it's overwhelming. Sometimes it's there's these two opposing things for some people. um some people, they never have any there's nothing ever uncomfortable about doing screaming for long periods of time.
Yeah.
For myself, I actually have a vocal injury. I have a vocal cord polyp that I have had for 8 years, and the only way I can get rid of it is to get surgery on it.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of like, always that's always in my head, do I want to get surgery or not? um and how long to recover, and will I sound the same? um and so I think that during these times, my friend Cheney from the band Entheos, Cheney
Hmm.
Crab, she's a really good vocalist. So I asked her what she does, and she just said, you have to just make it a non-negotiable to practice a little bit every day, even if it's 10 minutes, even if it's 5 minutes. Like, you don't have to run your set for 2 hours. You just need to like keep yourself like limber. You got to keep yourself stretching. So that way, when it is time to start preparing for a tour or preparing for a big show, you're not having to go from that weird. I don't know if you've ever, it's probably been a long time since you've done something like that where you weren't in good vocal shape, but do you remember those days? You
I
have to
do.
break in your
I
scream.
very much do, because we would kind of, especially in the younger days, what we do is we kind of compartmentalize it a little bit, where it's like, oh, I'm a vocalist right now. And then when you step away from it, you aren't.
Yeah.
And that's just not true,
Yeah.
is that
And
big thing.
so the breaking in your voice, like,
Yeah.
and it really made it click to me when a couple years ago when she was talking to me about that, is that, like, if you're always practicing, then you don't ever have to break in your voice. You're just helping your voice be stronger, and you don't have to overdo it. It's like,
Yeah.
start lifting a 5-pound weight first before you lift a 50-pound weight.
And make sure, like, to make sure your legs keep working, that you do in fact get out of bed every day and walk
Yeah.
around.
Yes. Yeah.
And
So
it is that same kind of thing. Yes.
that's what's works. That's really was an aha moment for me, because um I personally I'm less impressed with vocal performance, and I'm a lot more impressed by vocal consistency, because that's like
Yes.
the always like a carrot dangling over my head, like, one day, you know what I mean? Like, I'm so much more impressed if someone can be consistent for 20 shows in a row versus someone who can be good for 2 shows and then their voice is blown out for the rest of the tour.
Yeah, and that's always such a shame when that happens, both to be that person and be in that situation, and also to be on the receiving end and hearing that, especially
Yeah.
because when you're writing for your audience and getting ready to bring that act around the world, you want to make sure that you're delivering something honest and that you're able to give those people what they're expecting, not necessarily to appease them, but to make sure the consistency between the album and what you're doing in person is actually in line with itself,
Yes. Yeah.
essentially. So that is definitely a skill that takes time, But if given the proper amount of time, like you mentioned, even a few minutes a day, it is definitely possible.
Yeah. You just got to try, you just got to do whatever you need to do to feel like you're in a place where you're comfortable to do that. So like for me, I live in a condo building, and we have a home studio, but it's like 40 minutes away. So for me, that's like a perfect excuse to not do it. Oh, I don't feel like going out there today.
Yeah.
But so I need to think to myself, what I've been trying to do is saying, okay, you're not going to go out there every day. Let's soundproof this room then. You don't know how to do that? Let's watch a YouTube
Let's learn.
video. Let's learn. It's expensive. All right, let's save up for it. Let's save every dollar for it. So you know what I mean? Like, so it's just kind of holding yourself accountable, I think, is the most important thing. Because it's with screaming, it's so easy to not hold yourself accountable, because sometimes it can be it's exhausting. I find it mentally and physically
It's
exhausting.
a big balancing act. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also sometimes if you're not doing right, it causes pain, and you're annoying everyone around you. So there's a lot of excuses you can give yourself to not practice.
Oh, yeah. And then even from your perspective, which is many other people's, where you do have an injury and you have to actually, and that's not like the whole cataclysmic, the world ends. What people don't realize, it's okay, cool, this has happened. I now have to continue existing after
Yeah.
this, and I have to exist with it and learn what that means. Because even people that have those good intentions at first, getting that kind of level of hurt isn't something that it's not something that you can excuse yourself from. Anyone is susceptible to it, even if you have all the knowledge in the world.
Hmm.
Things happen. And you need to understand, again, that level of responsibility of knowing how to work with it and being able to take that responsibility, which it's very clear that you have.
Yeah, I felt like I kind of felt like I had to relearn how to scream and sing, and relearn how to speak, like
Yeah.
everything, because my voice just fatigues so quickly. Um, I anytime where people are, if we're trying to get some recording done and we're like, we only have an hour left, Courtney, you got to finish all the screaming. I'm like, guys, I don't think you understand. I can only do this for like fully, like how I would do it on an album where there's no visual to show my aggression. There's only my voice, so you have to really deliver. I'm like, I can only do this for like 40 minutes before I feel like the integrity of my voice, it just starts to feel weak.
And then the product suffers.
Yeah, so I'm like, so don't worry. We'll get out of here in like the next hour. So that's why I kind of keep having that back and forth of, wouldn't it be nice to not have to think about that anymore, but and
Yeah.
get surgery, but also what if it makes things worse?
Or what if it changes the fundamental
Yeah.
sound that you've had?
Yeah, and I like how I sound. I just wish that for me, it's the scream. It's made my screaming more interesting. I think it's made my singing has suffered, but then again, that's okay when you're writing your own songs,
Because you
because
can work around it.
yeah, because I just do what I know I can consistently do, um, and I think if I was in a band where I just screamed, or in a band where I just sang, I probably wouldn't be so like stressed out about that kind of stuff. But I don't know how you visualize it, but like
Hmm.
I visualize going in between singing and screaming, like shifting down in a car, like going from like,
Yes.
do you know what I mean? And
That's
so it's like,
exactly how I teach this, actually, like
oh
being
my
able to
god.
go between the gears of both.
And if it's stuck in the wrong gear, you'll mess up your car, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, that's always been my visual in my head, is the gears. So that's how I always explain it to people that don't do that, because it's hard to explain.
Yeah, because even though we don't want to treat it like a whole different like alien world, we want to treat it as somewhere where we have to actually get ourselves from A to B
Yeah.
with a
Yeah.
concise movement and understand how to fluctuate between both of them, but do it well.
Hmm.
So driving manually,
Yeah.
essentially, and
Yeah.
not just like stepping on the gas and being like, hope this works,
Yeah. Exactly.
essentially. And speaking of the note of being in different kinds of bands, doing different types of things, you have a fair amount of experience with different things touring wise and writing with different types of groups. given your previous history with the band that you used to be in, I Wrestled a Bear Once. And
Hmm.
while I'm not necessarily going to dig too much into the history, what I am curious about is something that a lot of vocalists do face, especially in a modern day with people and just the amount of bands there are and the availability of it. And that is the shuffling of people and how people oftentimes find themselves in one situation and then wake up the next day and are in a totally different one, and
Yeah.
how to handle that. Now, what I
Yeah.
wanted to ask is, since you've made that transition between already having been in an established group before and having to, in some ways, start over again within the same industry of people, how was that for you, and why was that worthwhile to not give up when things didn't work out in the way that you thought they might?
Well, I think that obviously it's always a compulsion. Like
Yeah,
I don't make I if no one liked my band Spiritbox, we would still be compelled to do it.
for
We
the
might
art.
we just we you know it's you just can't help it. It's a
Yeah,
compulsion. And whether it's a delusional one or not, like it's a compulsion. And I think that um man, that's such a good question. I think that going from a band like that of Iwabo size to now transitioning into my new band, I never felt like giving up because I felt like even though I learned a lot of stuff that I didn't like in Iwabo, but like how I personally would not want to run the business side of my um, project, I learned a lot of what not to do and what to do, and so
yeah,
I feel like it was like a crash course in how to run an operation of that level. So if anything, it gave me it gave me more confidence in putting out new music to know that as long as some people accepted me when you're in, like I was in a very polarizing band. Not a lot of people just didn't care about Iwabo. They either liked them or they really didn't like them.
yeah.
So you know, so being from that band kind of helped and hurt Michael and I, but I think the learning experience is what helped us a lot. So I came into the, you know, announcing and releasing Spiritbox music with a newfound confidence because I learned what to do and what not to do. It's like work experience.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is you kind of learn through experiences, both good and bad. They're all a part of us, and it helps us learn what our values are. And it helps us learn what are the real core things that are important to us,
Hmm.
and how do we retain that within our art and, like you said, within our business.
Hmm.
Because it's our job to be able to have an understanding of both things.
Yes.
You don't get to do one or the other. We have to be both.
And that's the thing that's so hard for all of us artists, you know. Not everyone can have those pillars of what the pop world wants. It's so rare, and it's why people like
And it's
Lady
constantly
Gaga
changing.
and Beyonce and stuff are just forever at the top because just generally most of us won't we don't have every single one of those little pillars
Yeah.
of money, good looking, talented, spare time, like
Yeah.
the you know like and then
The
also
unbelievable, the
business.
resources.
Yeah, resources, business sense. Most of us don't have all of that.
Yeah.
Or like and like visually, like visual package, all that stuff. Most of us are lucky to have. I'm just happy to have like one or two of those. So you know, it's tough out there because I think generally most of us that are trying to become professional musicians, we generally lack the business part because it's not what we don't care about that stuff. So I've learned a lot more. I've learned to embrace it and become more knowledgeable about it.
Which is the best thing we can do, is to, like I always say to people, arm themselves with the right kind of knowledge and understanding and different viewpoints and perspectives of how to tackle a situation, how to handle a problem, how to deal with things when they do kind of fall apart on you, and to know what to do within yourself to be able to move on to whatever the next phase of you is going to be.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
and in your example here, you bring up a lot of very powerful women in music. And you're right in that they are just the front runners of that and have such a vision and are able to push forward in so many different ways because of that. Specifically in the metal world, in recent history, it seems that things have improved slightly in that there are many other women coming to the forefront of metal, and specifically from a vocal standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And what I wanted to ask you is, from the inside and someone working within the industry and this whole world in general, in your time, have you noticed a shift in the viewpoint of people, and have you seen more open-mindedness
Mm-hmm.
recently?
I have, it's been extremely a huge change for the last in the last decade. But then I still have to acknowledge that the people that are drawn to all of our bands that have women in the band,
Yeah.
and it's their story is generally the story that is being vocalized, their lyrics and their experiences. I think the people drawn to that are, very modern, open-minded people. And sometimes we accidentally step out of our little bubble and into the world where people have just really are offended by my gender or someone that presents as female um, doing this kind of music.
Yeah.
But there's still, more importantly, because those people will always be there. More importantly, I think that a lot of us women have given our fans like the tools to express why that's wrong, and we see our fans educating those. We don't have to do it as much. We don't have to stand up for ourselves as much. Our fans are educating their friends and other people and having that dialogue because they understand now, like a light bulb went off. And of course, mostly every woman has understand what's that's like.
Yeah.
But where the metal world is predominantly men that listen to my type of band. We're like an 80-20 split for that.
So, and what you're saying is so true. It's just it's people educating themselves. That's
Yeah.
the really wonderful thing about that, and being able to perpetuate that kind of positivity outward and have that expand and bring that open-mindedness to other places where it wasn't previously, which is
Mm-hmm.
definitely great to see.
Yeah.
From your own perspective, like even though you didn't start the screaming aspect till later, I can imagine, just like any of us getting started in that time period, because that's around when I got started myself. But from your perspective, you might have gotten a fair amount of pushback from the people around you when you started to
Mm-hmm.
like teach yourself how to scream and started to
Mm-hmm.
pick that up as an interest. What was that like for you, and how much of that pushback did you get initially?
Yeah, it's so funny to think back on it. It was met with like general disgust because
Yeah.
because there's something so powerful and domineering about screaming, which we mainly associate is a masculine trait. And there's no pretty way to scream. You know what I mean? Like it's very
Yeah, like
viscerally,
people
it's
view
very
it as
intense.
or as a very animalistic kind of forceful sound, and people hear more of the force than the
Yeah.
depth
And
initially.
and a lot of people, men and women, but they are like repulsed and almost threatened by a woman not just trying to have her most important thing be her beauty and being
Yeah.
feminine. And so I think that, which is so ironic because I love having long, pretty hair and fancy nails and makeup and all that stuff. Like and it has nothing to do with what actually being feminine is, because
Yeah.
all of us participate, and it's a performative thing that we all show in different ways. But
Yeah, we want to feel good about
yeah,
ourselves.
yeah. And so I think that's the thing. It's how it's kind of like how a lot of men, they like women to be sexy, but they don't like when we have the agency of the
Yeah.
sexiness. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So it's like porn's cool, but then like if Jennifer Lopez shakes her ass on TV, that's all of a sudden like drawing a line. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
it's like, yeah, that's cool, but not like that.
Yeah, like
Stupid.
that's not on their terms.
Yeah.
So that was how I felt. But that was just where I was. I was just talking to some of my other girlfriends about that, and they didn't feel like that at all. You know, when they were growing up, they felt like they happened to be in a community where their guys truly treated them as equals,
And that's wonderful.
which is great. And I think most girls starting out now, at least people would feel uncomfortable publicly showing their disgust. They would at least be self-aware enough to be an internet warrior or
Or
tell their friends. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Or
Yeah.
keep those thoughts to themselves versus
Yeah.
before, where even I remember getting that same kind of thing where it was just met with general disgust.
Yeah.
And although not in the same way, it's similar in that it was met with a general disgust, but it wasn't because of this isn't what someone like you should be doing, which I can
Yeah.
imagine brought a lot of
It's
frustration.
another layer. Another layer. But how you felt, like what you were saying, you know, you still have you know, I'm sure we all still have the relative that goes, well, your music's really good, but I wish you wouldn't do that screaming stuff. You
Yeah.
know, you're like, you're belittling, you're like, they don't realize it, but they're like belittling your career. You're like, I
Yeah.
teach people how to do this, guys. Like, this is my business. But it's like that. It's like just like an additional layer to that, where you're just like, am I going to educate these people and show them that, you know, a lot of people like this kind of stuff? Or I'm just going to roll my eyes and go, yeah.
I mean, the big thing is like metal music and music with screaming in it is some of the top grossing music just in the world. And it's like the
Yeah.
fastest growing industry of all of them because of how loyal the people involved are and the vast amount of people that are joining into that art form. And it's really recognizing it for what it is, which is an art
Yeah.
form, and having that kind of depth that you and I are talking about here from an emotional level, and having it not just be aggression based, and having it
Yes.
not just be impulsion based, and
Yeah.
different things like that. In terms of the kind of the few that remain in the areas that it does, that kind of gap between the ideas, between vocally what a man and a woman can do, what, in your viewpoint, what work still needs to be done to kind of bridge that gap and then eventually just close it?
Well, I think that most of us, and I don't mean to speak for every girl that does
Yeah.
extreme vocals of some sort, but I feel like we're always trying to prove that we're as good as the guys. And by as good, I just mean like vocal range. We want to prove that we can go as low in our tone as a man can, and we can go as um, like kind of, you know how when like I don't know all the terms, the
Yeah.
professional terms that you know, but you know how sometimes there's a voice in a scream, and then also sometimes it's just like that voice, it's like that frequency has been really turned down, and just like the really like the distortion parts really turned up. It doesn't sound human at all. Like
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, we are always kind of, as we're starting to figure out how we sound, we're always kind of trying to prove to everyone that we can sound, you know, in a blind taste test, you can't tell who's who.
Yeah.
um, and which it's funny when it does happens a lot to a lot of women, where people don't, they're listening and they don't realize it's a girl, and then when they find out it's a girl, then they're like, oh. But when I was recording
Yeah.
my band's Spiritbox's first EP, I was getting so frustrated when I was trying to record, and I just was like, man, I just really don't like how my voice, the tone of my voice right now. This is in like 2016. I was like, I don't like the tone of my voice. I sound like a girl. And my husband, who's in my band, he was like, Courtney, good. You are
Yeah.
a woman. You're a woman. So whatever you do sounds like a girl. Anything you do sounds, if you do the lowest low, you sound like a girl. If you do the craziest black metal scream, you sound like a girl, because that's you doing it. And it really made me like, it really clicked for me, like, yeah, why am I running away from sounding like a girl? I sound awesome. You know?
Owning it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really understanding how, at least from what I gather from that, it's not holding yourself to other people's standards,
Yeah.
regardless of what those are.
Yeah. And then I think in doing that, it will just bring a lot more range of voices to the table. And I think that a lot of the metal world's, it's so, saying metal world is such a huge, giant,
That's really broad.
broad umbrella. It's like there's all the little subgenres are so in their own little unique area. So
Yeah.
personally, in whatever subgenre I'm associated with, those men treat me the same way they treat any other vocalist friends. So I feel like that gap has it's not closed yet, but it's like it's very, very much closing.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if it's like that for someone, say, um, Alyssa in Arch Enemy. That's a different world, and I see
It's a
and
different
it's
territory.
a different territory and a different, like, very performative type of, concert experience. Like, it's just, I saw them one time because uh we played a festival that met up, and I was like, whoa, I feel like this is a show.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
there's like fireworks and stuff. I feel like I'm at a wrestling show. This is amazing.
And to that token, it's a whole different world
Yeah.
and a whole different market of people with a different way of thinking.
Yeah, so I can't speak for all of us, but in the world that I dabble in, I'm feeling very happy with how things are going. It's progressing.
And that's good that we've been able to see as much change in that aspect and that kind of mentality as we have in the last 10 or so years. And that's
Yeah.
something here at Extreme Vocal Institute, and just I as a person try and be very mindful of, especially because really almost half of the people coming in now are women that are interested in starting their metal vocal careers
Wow.
and making sure they have what they need from the get-go to be able to
Isn't
do
that
what they're doing
interesting?
in a safe and healthy way. And it's a wonderful thing to see, just the interest increasing so much because of like what people like you and others are doing to help inspire those at these levels from the get-go to start doing it, because they feel empowered enough and open enough to be able to put themselves out there in this kind of way that would not necessarily have been as easy a decision to make a decade ago.
That
And
that is so cool. I am so shocked at that statistic. And you know what? I bet that, I mean, this anecdotally, if you were to talk to any of your coworkers who are trying to, your peers, I wonder if their ratio would be the same. I feel like it probably has a lot to do with your character, and like they feel I think that that's so cool, and you should pat yourself on the back too, that all different people feel comfortable looking dumb in front of you. You know what I mean? Like,
it
that's
definitely takes
so,
an ability to laugh at yourself, an
yeah,
ability to allow yourself to be open in front of others is really what
yeah.
that is. But even
So
then, at
that's
the same
really cool.
time, thank you, I appreciate that. But even at the same time, I'm always making sure I'm mindful of the fact that regardless of what I teach and how much positivity I'm able to present and put out there into the world and give to my students, I am still coming from the male perspective because I can't change who I am. And because of that, there are things on a fundamental level that I can't relate to as much as I may try.
Hmm.
So and a big reason why I wanted to talk about this topic with you is to essentially allow myself to respectfully just get out of the way, because there are things that I understand that aren't necessarily even my responsibility to have in terms of viewpoint.
Yeah.
Like, it's not things that have to do with what I've been able to experience in my life.
Hmm.
So to that token, what I wanted to ask you is, with other vocalists and women that want to be metal vocalists just starting out now, for those that may be feeling that same kind of pushback from either their friends or their peers, or maybe even people within their own homes
Hmm.
that are kind of discouraging them from going after this, what would you say directly to them to get them through that sort of thing?
I would say that, you know, depending on how old you are, you'll come to realize I feel like the older you get, you come to realize how there's some people that you have allowed them to have a significant role in your life. You realize as you get older that their role has diminished and it's not as significant as it once was, because you're no longer being forced to hang out with them at school for 8 hours every day.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about saying something to make things uncomfortable for the rest of the school year, or to make things weird at Stacy's party on the weekend. You know, you can just stop hanging out with those people and never talk to them again. You don't have to be friends with them on Facebook. Fuck them. Like, don't, anyone that puts you down and makes you feel about anything, you don't, it's hard. It's a weird mentality that I didn't get until I was out of high school. So I'm speaking to all of you that are in high school or in college, and you're just kind of, you're surrounded by the same people over and over due to just where you, the geography of where your classroom is.
Yeah.
And then I would just say that, you know, a lot of people, to those of you that are older, a lot of people are, a lot of people have done in their lives what they were expected by their families to do. And they have a lot of, and even though they're happy, they still have a lot of resentment in some ways, because they get to now have an excuse of as to why they never followed their dreams. They can say, you know, and most of the excuses are very valid. Like, if Michael and I had a kid right now, I wouldn't be trying to go on tour. I'd be like, well, I made another human, so I'm going to focus on that human.
Yeah.
But just people in general, it's like, they, without kids, you know, I think that they get to use what, everything that they've invested into this life that they don't particularly want to live. They've used that as an excuse to not ever have to follow, like, people that have the privilege of being able to follow their dreams. I'm talking about those people.
Yes.
You know, people like me, we have supportive family who has let us live in their house for free when we were broke and stuff. Like, a lot of people don't have that. So you have to recognize that too. But I'm talking to the people that have that privilege. They're going to put you down because they're jealous of you. Maybe not you specifically, but of seeing someone that's still being free and living their own life, and like living out this dream that they have for themselves to become a professional in this field that they've chosen to go into. So, you know, it's usually, it's the same as like for a woman in most careers, where there's all these little like subtle digs that you just have to learn how to deal with them in whatever way satisfies you the most. So whether it's ignoring them or it's just having some awesome comeback, people are always going to, whether they know it or not, they're going to give you, there's going to be all these negative digs that are these passive aggressive statements that will eternally haunt you. But you just have to not worry about it. And don't let geography determine who you work with in your band, or your vocal coach, or who manages you, or where you go and record. That's no excuse anymore. You know, Michael and I live here on this island, and we're the only people involved in this band that live here. Everyone else that's on our team lives in other countries or cities. So don't work with people that are gonna, you know, treat you like a second-class citizen just because it's like the only bass player in your town.
Yeah.
You know, screw those guys. So I would just say, you know, don't be afraid. Don't try to be something you're not. Just embrace who you are, and write about what you know. Don't be scared to acknowledge your gender. You don't have to make everything in your writing be universal, non-gendered. If you want to write about being a woman, do it. You know, it's bold and it's a new, fresh perspective. And it's the other thing that you'll always have to deal with, but you just got to get used to it and tell those people to F off, is that people will always parade you around like you are a mascot with no agency in your band. And that you know what I mean? Like, they'll you are the front woman, and you just show up, and the men in the band are the ones that do everything. And you just have to learn to take it with grace. And if you feel it in your power to mentally deal with it, because sometimes we just don't have the mental ability to educate people, like people need to educate themselves, like
Yeah.
have those conversations and have bandmates that are going to stick up for you and be your ally. I think if you have all those things together, you'll have a really positive experience. And it's just getting better and better and better.
And it's that kind of thinking and that mentality and those types of actions that are going to take this art form that we love and really push it into a more progressive and more sustainable place that's going to actually ensure that this thing we care about so much is actually going to have a sustainable and open future.
Yes. And I'd say that, you know, like you just have to learn to it's okay, because as women in general, we've been really um we've been taught you don't ever want to make anyone uncomfortable. Like our whole thing is like being hospitable and having you and buffing out anything uncomfortable. And I think that you just have to learn how to stand in that uncomfortability when a guy says, I really dislike female vocalists, but I like you. You don't have to make them feel comfortable just because they said a nice thing about you.
Yeah.
You can say, what do you mean by that? Like, how do you think that's a compliment to me? I think everyone else of your gender sucks, but you're pretty good. Like, why couldn't you just tell me I'm good? So it's like you just have to learn to kind of let stew in that uncomfortable zone and stick up for yourself.
Yeah, and not feel the responsibility to have to like bear that with every single person, and
Yeah.
more so create that ability to have people educate themselves
Yeah.
by not just being complicit with things and actually putting yourself in there and just addressing that kind of bigger idea.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your insight here on all of these different topics. I appreciate your time speaking about all these things, and I think all of our students and our viewers are really going to appreciate what you have to say here, and for that I thank you.
Well, it makes me so happy. Like my day is going so well now just to know that you have so many women that are wanting to safely learn how to do this very extreme style of singing. And they're going to be set up with the skills needed to not get a vocal polyp or an injury and stuff. So that's absolutely incredible. And I'm happy that they're going about it in such a responsible way, a very efficient way to get to where they want to be.
Oh yeah, and just despite the insanity of the world and the different times that we're in, I am hopeful for the future because of the open-mindedness of those that are coming out of the woodwork to really understand more than just themselves and be able to have that kind of open-minded and broader way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And again, thank you so much for your time. That's all we've got for you guys today. Thank you all for tuning in. If you liked this, go ahead and subscribe to our channel here. And we're always happy to bring you and our friends lots of different vocal information and information on how to best carry yourself throughout these many different types of situations, because no one situation is the same and no two people are the same. And remember that.
Yes,
I'm
and
David from yes.
keep taking lessons from him. You never can be too good for lessons. You'll always learn from your teacher.
And with that being said, I'm David from Extreme Vocal Institute, and this is Courtney from Spiritbox. Thank you all and have a good rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.